ministry leaders. This is Matt, and I'm going to be doing a training for you that are currently leading and also for future student ministry leaders to come. This training video and others that are going to follow it are designed to help you read and respond to situations that you face as a student ministry leader so that we can be effective in our mission. The question we're discussing today, the things I'd like to teach you, are related to who do I give my time to when I don't have much time to give? Now, I've asked this question many times over the several years that I've been leading in the student ministry. I have also asked this question when I've led community groups. It's just a question you have to ask all the time because you have a limited amount of time, 168 hours a week. You have to, work and sleep. You have your family. You have all sorts of demands on your time. And then you've taken on this responsibility to lead in the student ministry with junior high school and high school students, and you're not quite sure, who you should get with and what you should do when you get with them. It all can be very kind of disorienting and difficult to know how to get started. So, how do we answer this question here? The way we're going to answer it is I'm going to be teaching you two paradigms. Now, paradigms are like a pair of glasses that you put on to see things that are invisible. There are things going on behind the scenes that you can't see, but when you put on the paradigms, you can see them. And when you see them, you can read the situation correctly and then respond appropriately. Paradigms are concepts or ideas. And so I want to teach you two paradigms that will help you answer the question, who do I give time to when I don't know how much time to give, when I don't have much time to give? So the first paradigm is the 5 faith catalysts. The 5 faith catalysts come from North Point Ministry, and they're a very helpful tool in evaluating where people are at in terms of their spiritual growth and where they need to be and how we as leaders can help. The second paradigm is the relational credit score. You're all familiar with your financial credit score. When you pay your bills on time, you get a higher credit score, and that allows you to get loans at lower interest rates and credit cards and all sorts of financial benefits. But we also have relational credit scores. And in order for us to be effective in the student ministry, we have to have a high relational credit score with the students that we work with. Now, I'd like to begin by reminding you of our win in the student ministry. Our win is to partner with parents to help their students grow a faith of their own. We want students to grow a faith that is their own. Now, if their faith grows, then the relationship and intimacy with God grows, their knowledge of God grows, and they have more confidence in His Word. They're more likely to trust and obey Him, and then they experience the blessings that God wants to pour out in their lives. And so we want to help them with this. So back to the question. Who do I give my time to when I don't have much time to give? The first paradigm is the first catalyst, the 5 faith catalysts. Now the 5 faith catalysts are catalysts. They are 5 things that grow or accelerate spiritual growth and faith in God. If you were to have everybody in the student ministry leadership team, all of us, come to the office, and we had a whiteboard, and I asked you all to share with me how you grew in your faith, key moments where you really grew, what brought you to Christ, what helped you grow in Christ, you would say every one of these 5 things. These 5 things are the 5 essential nutrients, you could say, or the 5 most common patterns that you see in all the stories and testimonies that Christians share. And they are, first, practical teaching. I was at a church, and I grew up going to church in the Catholic Church. I didn't understand what the priest was saying. I never really understood the Bible, never read the Bible. When I was sitting in this church and this pastor was preaching, it was like he was speaking to me. It was just opened my eyes. I went to a youth retreat or a conference for college, and I was in a small group, and we were talking, and this person shared this verse, and I had never even heard it before, and it was just like, that makes so much sense. I was listening to a seminar or a podcast, or we read a book, and it just opened my eyes. There's always a point at which someone really begins to understand the Bible in a practical way. And when that happens, their faith begins to grow. We want that for our students, for all of our students. If they're not in environments, and in those environments, if they're not receiving, right? And receiving has 2 parts. Receiving means we've given it, and receiving means they've accepted it. If they're not in an environment and receiving practical teaching, then their faith is not going to be growing. Number 2, providential relationships. Providential relationships are key relationships with people who have influence in their lives. And these people can really accelerate their faith. If they trust these people, if they love these people, if they admire these people, and these people love, trust, and admire Jesus, they pull along our students towards a life of faith. The enemy also provides relationships to get our students off track. I've told this many times, you've experienced this perhaps, but when a man begins to grow in his faith, it's not too long before a girlfriend from the past, an old flame, or a job opens up across the country, pulling them out of the church. And these are circumstances and people that the enemy is providing to get this person off track. Providential relationships are really key. So who, other than their parents, do the students that you're responsible for really look up to, really admire, really like? Who are their closest friends? Who has influence over their lives? The third faith catalyst, excuse me one second. The third faith catalyst is private disciplines. Private disciplines are spiritual disciplines. Think of the navigator wheel, right? You learn to read the Bible and pray. You learn to serve and share your faith. There's all kinds of disciplines. Now, when a person begins to really grow in their faith, maybe in your own testimony, is when you started reading the Bible for yourself every day and God began to start speaking to you, right? When you prayed in your own voice, not just the prayers that you memorized when you were a kid. Like when I was a kid, I learned, now I lay me down to sleep, pray the Lord, a soul will keep. And then I learned the Lord's Prayer, and I would say it every night with my mom, but I didn't know what it meant. But when I first started praying in my own words, right, that was when my heart was really open and crying out to God, and that was when I saw God answer. And so as students learn to pray, as they learn to read the Bible, they grow. Private disciplines. Are your students practicing any private disciplines? Which disciplines, spiritual disciplines, are the students you're responsible for regularly doing, and which ones do they need to learn? What about pivotal circumstances? Pivotal circumstances are those critical moments in your past and in your present that absolutely shape your future. So, for example, Steve Jobs told his, I think, Methodist pastor or priest or bishop, whatever you call it. Steve Jobs was 13, 12, 11, and he came to his Methodist pastor and he said, "Is God all-powerful?" And the pastor said, "Yes." And he said, "Is God all-knowing?" And the pastor said, "Oh, yeah." And he said, "Is God loving?" And the pastor said, "Yes." Steve Jobs plopped down on the table the Time magazine cover, which was this baby from Ethiopia that had a distended belly, starving children in Africa. He said, "Does God know about that? And if he does, why doesn't he stop it?" Now, the pastor apparently didn't have a good response, and that was the day Steve Jobs said he walked away from Christianity. That is a pivotal circumstance. There's all kinds of pivotal circumstances. Parents getting a divorce, there's a major accident. For example, Matt Sturdivant was hit by a boat. That was a big part of his faith story. I broke my hand and my knee my senior year of college, and that brought me to Cal Baptist. And then at Cal Baptist, I was expelled, and that brought me to faith. Pivotal circumstances are one of the ways that God really gets our attention. And so, for your students, what are some of the pivotal circumstances in the past that have shaped them in the present? Many of the experiences your students have had in the past have not been they've not been debriefed. They've not been talked through. They haven't been coached to look at them with the eye of faith, to see what God is doing. And so for some students, things in the past that have hurt them or offended them are keeping them from growing in their faith in the present. It's going to keep them bound into the future. And so we need to be asking the question, what are some pivotal circumstances that have gone on in the past? But also, what's coming in front of them? Which of my students that I'm responsible for have some crossroads coming up, big ones, where if they go this way instead of that way, they go their way instead of God's way, there's going to be consequences. As their leaders, we want to be looking out in front of their life, even if they're not, so that we can help them anticipate and prepare. Pivotal circumstances are one of those faith catalysts. And the last one is personal ministry. I went to Africa in 2003. That was a huge trip for me. It was 1 month in Africa with Nathan and Tina and Joy and Priscilla and Brandon and all these other people. And in that 1 month of ministry, when I came back, I left the church I was a part of because they weren't doing evangelism. I decided I wasn't going to go home and live off of my dad. I cut up the credit cards. I decided to stay in Riverside and get a job. I broke up with my girlfriend, Brittany, so I could date Joy, not knowing if she would say yes. I decided to come to church in the valley. I mean, so many big decisions were made, but that was because I had taken a big risk, at least at that point in my life, to go on this mission trip, to put up some of the money, to come back from the mission trip not knowing where I was going to live. So these are ways that God grows us. When a student is asked to teach or lead or do something really hairy and scary that stretches them, they have to depend on God in a way that they haven't. And so we want to help them by giving them responsibility and giving them challenges that will grow their faith. We want to ask the question, are they being stretched? So you see how these 5 faith catalysts provide us something like a ruler to measure the students that we're responsible for it. And when you do that, it helps you to better decide who you need to spend time with, depending on where they are. So I'd like us to do a brief case study, and I'm going to go over it now, and then we're going to discuss it at our next meeting. This case study is 3 imaginary students in our student ministry, 3 ladies. They're all 12th graders, and their names are Stacy, Susan, and Susie. So let's go ahead and look at these 3 from the angle of 5 faith catalysts. And the question that I want us to discuss at our next meeting is, if you had 1 hour to spend next week and you had to pick one of these 3 girls to spend it with, which of these 3 girls should you spend it with? So let's start with Susie. Susie's a 12th grader. When it comes to practical teaching, she's attending worship and she's attending CSM. She's in a position to receive it. When it comes to personal providential relationships, she has a boyfriend named Tom, and he has a big chunk of her heart. She also has a best friend named Stacy and her coach. She loves her coach. Everything her coach says is right, and her heart is very much tied to this coach. When it comes to private disciplines, she attends the student ministry, but she doesn't do anything else. And when it comes to providential or pivotal circumstances, her parents were divorced when she was 6, and that was a huge thing for her. She's a hard time trusting people. She's a hard time trusting God because her dad left her mom. She's also on a travel ball team, and when she made that decision in junior high school, that decision had huge consequences for her future. It takes up her evenings, it takes up her weekends, it takes up her summer, and her entire schedule and life orbits like Earth around softball like the sun. And then finally, in the future, she has to choose, in pivotal circumstances, she has to choose which college she's going to go to. Is it going to be far, or is it going to be close? Is it going to be a Christian school, or is it going to be a public school? Is she going to go into debt, or is she going to try to get a scholarship? And then, when it comes to personal ministry, she's not involved in any kind of ministry. She doesn't help on Sundays at the church. She's not helping in any way in the student ministry because she's busy with softball. Okay? That's Susie. Number 2. Number 2 is Stacy. Now Stacy also attends worship and the CSM. Stacy's best friend is Susie, and Hannah. Hannah's a girl in the student ministry who has faith and is really participating and is a good influence in her life. Another major influence for Stacy is her Aunt Lisa. She's so cool. Everything she does is awesome. She's got a great job. She's about the same size as Stacy, so she gives Stacy her clothes, and so Stacy always has really cool clothes. Her Aunt Lisa takes her out and does all these fun things, and so the influence of Aunt Lisa on Stacy's heart is huge. But Aunt Lisa is not a Christian. In fact, she's pretty hostile to Christianity. She thinks Christians are bigoted and intolerant. When it comes to personal disciplines, Stacy, she does a quiet time, she prays sometimes, but she's never really been into scripture memory, but she does serve on Sunday. And when it comes to pivotal circumstances, well, her parents decided to homeschool her for her high school years. She was in the public schools in junior high school. That was where she became friends with Susie. But her parents were not happy with what they were seeing in the schools, and so they decided to homeschool her for high school. And that's been a point of some serious tension with her folks. She's a real social girl, and so she's not really digging the homeschooling. And she's almost done, but it's been hard. She also broke up with her boyfriend named Tom. You know Tom, the guy who's dating Susie. Now, she's also choosing a college, so she's making that decision as well. When it comes to personal ministry, she serves in the Kid Zone, but she's not being stretched. And she's on the charge team, so she's taking responsibility in the student ministry. That's Stacy. And number 3, the third girl that you could spend time with, is Susan. Now for Susan, She doesn't attend worship, and sometimes she comes to the student ministry, but it's kind of sporadic. It's very rare. She has a boyfriend. His name is Tom. Tom's a two-timer. Trauma. Her BFF is Susie. You know, Susie, whose boyfriend is Tom. Tom is a snake. And her stepmother is a huge influence on her life, but her stepmom's an atheist, pretty hardcore atheist. Now, when it comes to disciplines, she attends the student ministry sometimes, but there's nothing else. She doesn't read her Bible. She's not really a prayer. She doesn't have much of a personal inner spiritual life. And when it comes to pivotal circumstances, there was a car accident a couple years ago that really shook her up, She didn't understand why God let that happen to her. And there was never really any debriefing going on between her and her parents to help her see that circumstance from God's point of view and what God could work through it. So she has a kind of fear, a little bit of bitterness towards God because of it. Also, she was criticized by other students in the student ministry, even before you were a leader. When she was in junior high school in the student ministry, there was a lot of critical comments, judgmental comments made about her and how she dresses and what she's into. And so that has been a big part of what she says has caused her to pull away and why she only comes sometimes. She's also choosing a college. And when it comes to personal ministry, she's not involved in ministry. So, if you had to choose between these 3 students and you had 1 hour next week, which one of these 3 should you spend your time with? The second paradigm that we need to understand is before you get to the 5 faith catalysts, right? Before you can even talk to the students about practical teaching and would you like to learn how to have private disciplines and would you consider this personal ministry or hey, can we talk about some pivotal circumstances in your past? No, weirdo. Before you can do that, you have to have a trust relationship with them. There's always the prior question of trust. Can I trust you? Do I know you? Do I like you? Do you like me? Are you for me? That's a question everybody's always asking with everybody they're interacting with. They don't care what you know. They care how much, they don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. So the second paradigm is called the relational credit score. How do I get students to open up to me so I can help? That's a question that, again, everybody who works in student ministry, everybody who works with anybody has to answer. The answer to the question is this. You have to buy trust with love so you can spend the trust on truth. You buy trust with love and you spend trust on truth. That's the way it works. So you have to earn trust the way that you earn a higher credit score. You have to buy the trust through acts of love and kindness. This is how God turns our hearts towards Him. This is how God opens our hearts to Him. He does it through His loving kindness. And so we do that with our children, with our spouses, with our friends. This is the way it works. And so with these students that we're working with, they're never going to open up their lives and ask us for input or let us give them input, let us spend the trust on truth if they don't believe that we love them and are for them. So how do you do that? How do you buy trust with love? How do you love students? Well, you do it like you do with anybody else. You have to be kind. You have to enter their world. You have to affirm them and encourage them and accept them for who they are. Before you're ever getting to the point where you're telling them what you think God wants them to do or what the Word of God says in this circumstance, you should be able to look them in the eye and say, Susie, you know I love you. You know I'm for you. You know that I accept you and I want good for you. And Susie should be able to look back at you and say, I know, because of all the experiences that they've had of you loving them. And here's how you can do that. You can buy trust with love by your words. Some students love words. They love notes, they love texts, they love cards, they love encouragement, and they want it often. Some of you are like that. This is something that really makes you feel loved and appreciated. Which of your students would really feel loved by more words? Okay? What about this? Actions. Some students are physical. They like high fives and hugs. They like eye contact and full undivided attention. They want to see that you are really there with them. Which of your students are like that? What about gifts? I don't have a lot of money. I can't be giving gifts. Well, it's not a lot of money. It's a gift timely given. A gift thoughtfully given goes a long way. Some students, they have no expectation for you as a leader to remember that they're just got a job, just got their driver's license, just had a birthday, or some other significant thing in their life. And if you have a gift that you give that's timely and thoughtful, boy, that can really make them feel loved. There's also, and this is true for everybody, just time. The more time you spend, quantity time has a relationship to quality time. You want to share experiences with them. You want to do things that they enjoy or are good at. You want to do things that these young boys and these high school guys are good at. You want to get into their world. Not just inviting them into your world or some neutral space, but doing something that they would enjoy, going to their thing. That's what you want to do. That really shows them that you love them. And then when you're there, you want to affirm them and encourage them and try to participate and let them be the teacher and let you be the student. And when you do that, they really feel like you like them and appreciate them and affirm them. And that's what you're doing. And then finally, service. They have goals and they have plans and they have responsibilities, and some of them could use some help. And so if you're listening for things that you could help them with, right? If you're listening for things that they love and you could spend time doing with them, if you're listening for significant milestone events that you could honor with a gift, or even negative things that have happened that you could show a gift of support, if you're listening and paying attention to which students are really into a side hug and which students really are words people, they love words. This is something that their parents know. And you may want to ask their parents for the students that you're responsible for. Hey, is your son, what's he really into? What's he love to do? And let the parents help you with that. Because when you find this information out and then you give your time to doing this with them, you are buying trust with love. And then God will give you opportunities to spend the trust on the truth. Okay, that's how it works. Buy trust with love and spend the trust on the truth. So here's your next steps that I'd like you to take so we can start to work this stuff into us as a leadership team. The first next step I'd like you to take is I'd like you to fill out the 5 Faith Catalyst form for each of the students that you are over as best as you can, okay? Don't make things up, don't guess, just go through the form like I showed you behind me and fill it in as best as you can. It's going to be messy, you're not all going to use the same wording, but what I want you to do is take the students you're responsible for, the 3 or 4 students that are kind of on your plate, and I want you to work through your mind each student and say, do they get practical teaching? Do they do any regular private disciplines? What are some pivotal circumstances in their past or in their future that I know? Who are the providential relationships in their lives? Who are the people that have real influence that either the enemy or the Lord is bringing into their lives, et cetera, okay? And so when we get together next time, we'll be able to look at the paper with all of these people filled out, and that will help us. Second activity or step I'd like you to take is I'd like you to come ready to discuss the case study. Who should you spend the 1 hour with? Susie, Susan, or Stacy? And why do you say that? Okay, I want us to discuss that together at our leaders meeting that's coming up soon. And then finally, I'd like you to come to the meeting with one question, tension, or clarification that we can talk about regarding one of these 2 paradigms. So there may be something that I've said and you feel like I don't quite understand what you're saying, right? That would be a clarification. Or maybe there's a question that has come up as I was going through this. Yeah, but what about this? That's a question. Or maybe there's a tension, right? You're like, yeah, I get that we're supposed to do this, but what about this? I mean, how do we do both, right? That's a tension. So I want you to reflect on what I've just trained you in and then come with one question, tension, or clarification, all right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the email that this video is likely coming to you in the form of, and I'd like you to enter your question, tension, or clarification in the form by the deadline that I give you in the email, so that I have time to look at them and compile them into a list, and then we can use them to discuss. Because my goal is not just to talk, but also to work this into our leadership culture so that we're all using this paradigm to read the situation so that we can all answer this question. Who do I give my time to when I don't have much time to give? Okay, I hope this is helpful, and I will see you soon, and we'll discuss this together. You can get started on those next steps. If you have any questions or any issues of any kind, just email me, please, and I'll see you guys soon.